Today we're making a beef Wellington. This dish may look very complicated, but it's quite simple to make. I'm going to show you the ins and outs of how to do this and make a very impressive dish. Let's start by finely chopping up some shallots. We're using shallots here because they don't have a strong onion flavor. We're going to run some garlic through a garlic press too. We're going to need 1 pound of mushrooms that are washed. I like to use these baby bellas. Into the food processor go the mushrooms and process until they are fine. Then we're going to add the shallots and garlic and keep processing until we have almost a paste-like texture, like this. Into a cold skillet I got 2 tablespoons of butter, and I'm also going to add 2 tablespoons of grapeseed oil. Grapeseed oil will keep the butter from burning because it has a higher smoke point. Into the skillet goes the mushroom and onion mixture. We're going to cook this until it's dry and all of the moisture is cooked out of it. We'll set the mixture aside and let it cool until we're ready to use it. Next is the tenderloin, or you could use a fillet, which is a more expensive cut. We're going to use a center cut tenderloin here. We're going to season this liberally with some kosher salt and fresh ground pepper. Be sure to season the entire surface of this tenderloin. This is the only time you'll get to impart flavor on the beef. I even like to roll it around on the surface that I seasoned it on, making sure to get the ends too. Into a hot skillet, I'm going to put 2 tablespoons of butter and another 2 tablespoons of grapeseed oil. Make sure that the butter is completely melted and then put the tenderloin in and leave it alone. Let it get brown. We want to make sure that it's browned on all sides. This is the color you're looking for. Pretty nice, huh? Be sure to brown all sides, including the ends, like I'm doing here. The other side too. Once the tenderloin has been browned on all sides, and while it's still hot, you want to cover it with Dijon mustard. The Dijon I'm using here happens to be wine-free, which makes it halal. Be sure to brush all surfaces. Even if you're not a mustard lover, you do not want to skip this part, because the flavors that get imparted here won't taste like mustard later. Trust me on this. Every beef Wellington recipe calls for prosciutto. I don't eat prosciutto because it's pork, so I'm going to be using a turkey ham made by Halal. Before I use it, I want to make sure to pat it dry because moisture is the enemy. We want to keep everything that's going to get rolled into our puff pastry relatively dry as possible. That's why we're taking the time to make sure that the turkey ham has been patted thoroughly dry. What I'm doing next is I'm shingling the turkey ham so that I can roll the tenderloin on there. And that plastic wrap is going to help me to lift it and roll. And you want to try to make it as tight as possible. And at this point, right about here, is when you realize that you forgot the mushroom mixture. And then you go back and add it. Oops. Be sure to spread the mushroom mixture evenly across the entire surfaces of the turkey ham. Once we have a nice layer of mushrooms across the entire ham, we're going to place the tenderloin back on top of the mushroom mixture and proceed to tightly wrap this, as tight as we possibly can. Once it's rolled, put it in the refrigerator to chill. Now let's talk about puff pastry. You can make your own or buy it from the freezer section at Kroger like I did. Next, we're going to need some egg yolks. I'm going to use about 3 of them, mixed really well, and you can add a splash of water to thin it out too. Set the egg yolks aside and roll out your puff pastry. It seems that the puff pastry is a little bit too small for the roll that I have, so I'm going to have to put it together and roll it. I may also need to put end caps on here too, which is not a big deal. I'll show you how to remedy that problem, but first make sure to put plastic wrap on the surface that you're going to be rolling on. The plastic wrap will help us to make a tight roll, which is imperative. Next, I'm going to wash the joint of wherever I want the puff pastry to stick together with the egg wash. And then I'm going to do the perimeter with the same egg wash. Be sure to use the egg wash on the entire perimeter of the puff pastry because this will be our glue. Place the chilled tenderloin roll on the puff pastry and begin to tightly roll it. Once you've rolled it to where the two ends meet, you want to egg wash it because that's going to be the glue for the puff pastry. Cut the puff pastry where the two joints meet. Save the pieces of puff pastry that you cut off. Wash them with the egg wash and use them to cap off the two ends of our roll. I like to check the entire surface of the puff pastry, making sure that there's egg wash and that it's sealed all the way around. Then continue rolling in the plastic wrap, making sure that it's as tight as you possibly can get the roll. Be sure to chill the log for at least a half an hour. After a half an hour, we'll place on a parchment paper lined baking sheet and egg wash the entire surface of the puff pastry. Once we have the entire surface seam side down brushed with the egg wash, we're going to attempt to make a design. Once we have egg wash on the entire surface, we're going to take the back of a paring knife and do a design. I'm doing something really simple here, but you can go nuts. Be sure not to cut too deep into the pastry. Once you have your design on there, you want to put a meat thermometer right into the center of the tenderloin. For medium rare, you want to set the temperature to 120 degrees and bake at 425. After about 40 minutes, it'll come out golden brown and delicious. Be sure to let it rest for at least 15 minutes before cutting open and revealing the beautiful deliciousness of the tenderloin. I like to serve my beef Wellington with steamed carrots and mashed potatoes. No need for gravy here, but if you have a demi-glace like I do, reduced with a little bit of butter, you can put that on your plate and then the beef Wellington on top for the most exciting and impressive dish you're ever going to make.